It's Sunday morning. That means it's time to make some decisions. It's time to get together, gather around the warmth of the television set and watch some great football action. And we're going to try to help you win your matchups, or at least give you someone to blame when it all goes wrong. This is always Joined on Sunday Mornings by Chris Allen. Remember, you can find us here at 10 a.m. Eastern on this channel. And love seeing the subscriber totals going up. And you all are doing a fantastic job helping support football guys. We want to help support you today. So let's just jump right in. And as we touch on some of the hot button situations in the questions, we will pause and give a little more intense takes. Let's start with Daniel Smith. And, the earlier you get here, the earlier you get that question in. Last flex between these four: Travis Etienne, Rex Burkhead, Robert Woods, and Jacoby Myers.
Out of those four, so we got Travis Etienne going up against the Toothless Colts now.
Yeah.
Even though I do have some concerns about Etienne as a pass catcher, but there are also similar concerns about what Trevor Lawrence can do with him if he's actually going to be used. What was it? He had a 20 yard touchdown pass that Etienne was wide open for. Completely airmailed it. But just given the usage, looking at the other options that he's got right there, what Myers going up against, they got Pittsburgh today, if I remember, the Patriot against that. I lean Etienne in that sense. I think he's the best.
This was one, and this is not at all to cast any shade on you, Daniel. I was expecting the other options to be better. When the first option was Etienne, I was expecting better options. So that's Etienne, and he could have easily had 2 touchdowns last week. He looked good and explosive, and even though Etienne was a bit disappointing for a 4th round fantasy pick, that doesn't mean that he's not still a good flex play. And this could absolutely be a bounce back week. In DFS, I would sprinkle him in a little bit.
Sure.
Hokey 3548. How much are we trusting Mike Evans today? I think you gotta. Now he's going to see Marshawn Lattimore, and it could be a dud game. And Evans has his share of dud games. And this game here could be a defensive standstill. Because if you look at both sides of the ball, no Alvin Kamara, that's certainly a straw that likely no Alvin Kamara.
Right.
And so I think if you have Mike Evans, boy, you have to have some compelling options to play over him, partially because you're playing him because, well, that's just who does Tom Brady have to throw to today? Do you want to put a little more of a wet blanket take on that, or do you feel like you got him, you're playing him?
Yeah, I think that's where we're at right now, because I know if folks haven't already posted on Twitter, you can probably just go ahead and hop on Pro Football Reference and look up yourself. What was the last 2 matchups? He accumulated less than 70 yards in both matchups combined last season against the Saints. So I get the historical Evans versus Lattimore matchup. It's not great if you're looking to start Evans, but if we look at the options surrounding Tom Brady, what else should we expect from this week?
Right.
I mean, Chris Godwin out, Julio Jones, while he should be available, he was nursing an injury.
True game time decision today.
Yes, and same with Russell Gage, coming into this matchup too. So it's outside of those options, unless you're completely sold on Rachaad White, unless you're completely sold on Giovanni Bernard having a larger part in this offense, who else are we expecting to get targets? Because if Tampa Bay last week, coming out being still top 5 in pass rate over expectation, Tom Brady still wanting to sling it at 45 years of age, I can't see any other options in this Buccaneers passing game again. So I'm with you. I think if you've got Evans, you're starting him.
Yeah, I mean, there are some break points I could come up with, Rashad Bateman or Jalen Waddle or things like that. And look, I mean, it's still only week 2, folks, so trust your gut. But I think if you got Evans, you're playing him. And you mentioned Rachaad White, and I want to pause on him just for 1 second, because he is an interesting guy in so much as Leonard Fournette, also on the injury report, expected to play. But, we could easily see Fournette limp off. I think it's hamstring. So there's a lot of outs again with your DFS lineup diversity. it wouldn't be shocking if this was a breakout game for White. It wouldn't be shocking if we're talking about him as a week 3 pickup. And there was a lot of buzz in training camp preseason about him having some sort of dedicated role in the passing game. You certainly see how he can add more value to running back targets than Fournette can.
Right.
Okay, Gabe Davis. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, yeah.
You knew we were going to get to Gabe Davis.
Yes.
And we'll take the specific question first. PL02PL. If Gabe Davis can't go, who do you like between Osborne, Gainwell, Crowder, and Moss as an emergency pivot in 0.5 PPR?
KJ Osborne?
Yeah.
They provide, at least to me, it sounds like if you're already looking at Gabe Davis as a wide receiver, or just a fantasy asset by himself, that's just not a ton of floor, because even in last week, I mean, while second in targets, third in targets, like somewhere in there, but it was more the volatile targets. It was a downfield target. So you're swinging for the fences already. If you're starting Gabe Davis. So if we want to find an archetype of fantasy player along the same vein, that would be KJ Osborne, right? Because Gainwell, he might get you a little bit here and there, and they brought him in the red zone, okay, for a couple of snaps as well, but that was along with Miles Sanders and Boston Scott. Yeah. Jamison Crowder working in alongside Isaiah McKenzie, so it's and Zach Moss. While I think Zach Moss looked good, surprisingly good, in the week 1 debut, still rotating behind. If it wasn't Devin Singletary, it was also behind Josh Allen before James Cook got banished to the shadow realm for fumbling on his. So it's just Osborne for me.
Yeah.
Just looking at the matchup, and I do think this Eagles defense, who I thought was going to be one of the premier defensive units in the league, looks like they're already starting to show some cracks in their defense, especially with Derek Barnett going down. So right. I do like KJ Osborne, if Gabe Davis can't go.
Yeah, my initial take on this Minnesota Philly game was a lot of people with that last game. Remember, we have 2 Monday night games tomorrow night.
Yeah.
A lot of people I need this from this player. They're going to get it. I just think it's going to be a high-scoring game.
Lights out.
And I think that this is a good game to, again, stress that however your matchups go today, however you do in your fantasy leagues, however you do with your DFS lineups, this week is about recalibration and recontextualization of what we saw last week. So what we saw last week's meaning is going to change based on what we saw this week. Minnesota is a good example. What would Minnesota's offense have done if they were pushed? If they actually had to play in a game kind of like that Philly-Detroit game, where they had to put 38 points on the board to win.
Oh, Justin Jefferson would have had 400 yards.
Right. Maybe this week they'll have 400. Was James Bradbury? I don't know. CD Deuce? Who's going to be on him? It's going to be so many great matchups in that game. The offensive line versus Hunter and Darius Smith. Anyway, so we could see this offense was humming. The Minnesota offense was humming last week. They just really didn't need to put the pedal to the metal. They probably will this week. So I think it is Osborne. Kyle Phillips, who is also questionable. At least it's a shoulder, which I think means that they can put a harness on it or whatever.
Right.
It could affect his catch radius. But I think we could see last week immediately that budding relationship between Tannehill and Phillips.
Yes.
I think that's his guy. I really think that that's going to be – now, Treylon Burks can, again, add a lot of value after the catch. And this could be a Treylon Burks breakout game. It could be a Kyle Phillips breakout game, too, something to the tune of, say, 10 catches for 95 yards. Because game script wise, we just expect Tennessee to really struggle to keep up with Buffalo. And I think that's going to mean a lot of passing. So Kyle Phillips, another viable injury hedge. But when you get to guys like Gainwell, Crowder, McKenzie, Moss, I just don't know if Gabe Davis is out, who we could say is the main beneficiary. Dawson Knox? I was actually, that would be my first thought, Dawson Knox, right? But my point is it's uncertain. It's uncertain. So I don't think there's anybody on Buffalo's roster that's compelling. Burks, yes. So what I'm getting at here, Chris, is here's the list of players that you feel comfortable waiting on Gabe Davis if you have them. Osborne, Phillips, Burks, I think that's it. I mean, Devontae Smith, too, if you're planning on benching him.
Yeah.
And just, but at the same time, so what do we know about this Gabe Davis injury? Not much. He practiced in full and then came up limited with an ankle injury, which usually means he injured the ankle during the practice. So limited practice can be very deceptive because limited, you might think, well, he couldn't do everything. But limited could also mean he started the practice but didn't finish it. The Bills I think the Bills are expecting to play in the Super Bowl. I think they should be expecting to. I mean, that should be the mindset in the building. So if there's any hint that Gabe Davis, and Davis has had a couple of ankle injuries. I think this is his right ankle. So that's another thing. Folks find out if this is his right ankle,
The same one, yeah.
then maybe that's another reason to feel like set your lineup without him.
Mhm.
But I'll say this: if you have an option to play over Gabe Davis that is more compelling than KJ Osborne, there's more compelling to Kyle Phillips, more compelling than Traylon Burks, which isn't that hard to picture, then play them. Play them today. Don't even mess around with this. I mean, I'm saying on the conservative side. What do you think, Chris?
No, I think that's absolutely right. Because if you're looking at that, like the similar, like if you want to try and find a similar environment, and if you want to try and find at least that ceiling type play, those other options really aren't going to provide you that. But just as the game script that you outlined, like Kyle Phillips, like he could give you that production, just given the way that we think this matchup is going to go, like for Tennessee. So along that same logic, I mean, Isaiah McKenzie, like he could fit into that. Like if you wanted to throw him in, let's say if Gabe Davis like can't go. But again, if you're trying to like aim for that ceiling, like those are the types of plays that you should be looking at. And those other guys really don't provide that, in my opinion.
Yeah. So be conservative on waiting for Gabe Davis. I think Buffalo's going to be conservative.
Yeah.
Interesting layer question here. We can touch on this real quick. Tony 42K. Is it basically he wants to drop one of Ayuk or Tony to pick up Dante Foreman because he has Christian McCaffrey.
Okay.
My knee-jerk reaction here is don't. I mean, Dante Foreman's not going to change your season. Chuba Hubbard could still figure in. I don't even know if Carolina's offense will be any good if they don't have McCaffrey.
Right.
I mean, I know Mike Davis gave us some run 2 years ago in place of McCaffrey. I don't remember anybody in place of McCaffrey being a especially good start last year. I'm not expecting that this year. So I would say with IU could get a potential reveal as we were looking at the radar. Remember FFWX, Chris Allen. I don't think the weather's going to be a problem, at least to hold back what we can see from Lance and Ayuk. And with Tony, he's expected to play, and he's never. I mean, especially because this Giants offense is so bereft of options. On any given week, if Brian Dable says, "Okay, you said you're written on the board 100 times, I will, practice hard and show up or whatever," yeah. Then that could be the 7 for 125 in a touchdown game. So I think you hold to Ayuk and Tony. What do you think?
No, I agree, because I think, what is it the great JJ Zacharyson says, like even when we think we know who the handcuff is going to be or who that backup option is going to be, we tend to get them wrong.
Yeah.
And while I think it's easiest or easier for us as fantasy managers to see, well, Donta Foreman, even in last year, showed that he still has some juice. Hubbard has just been a body on the roster at this point.
Yeah.
So it's easy for us to point the finger and say, yes, he should be the guy to get the touches should CMC go down, but we don't know how this offense is going to look, especially with a lame duck coach like Matt Rule, like at the helm. It's just
the lamest of ducks.
Exactly. So it's like, is that really a situation that you want to continue to invest in even after like CMC goes down? I would rather take my shots on continuing to look at like those wide receivers, like either one of those two wide receivers, because just like you mentioned, if it does get to that point where, because earlier in the week people were, this is how weird, or I guess it's like how eclectic being a part of the fantasy space is, because we're now trying to figure out how good the relationship is between Kadarius Toney and Brian Daboll is, when people reporting about them, bumping fists like at practice, because like, I didn't
see that.
Yeah,
okay.
See,
a fist bump. I won't fist bump just anybody.
Yeah, see, that gets when that gets a reaction, we're deep in the weeds, man. So, but I do think though, the talent alone between those two receivers is something that you want to hold on to versus taking your chance on an ambiguous backfield like should CMC go down. I'd rather keep Ayuk and Tony.
Yeah, I think that's the answer here. Mr. Kev Murphy asks Pollard or Ingram. And this is fantasy football, right? It's week 2, and we're already like, oh, there's sometimes people ask me questions, Chris, and I'll say, I guess, sheesh, well, if you have to start one of them. So look, with Pollard, and I love Tony Pollard's talent. I know, just like Cordero Patterson, I know one day we will be talking about finally, maybe with another team, maybe in a different role.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if I should have been advising people to drop Pollard this week in short bench leagues, at least.
Yeah.
And I have so much trouble letting go of a talent like that, just like we're talking about Ayuk and Tony. Now with Ingram, you have the very high likelihood, I think that they said it's a rib cartilage injury, same injury that Justin Herbert has.
Yes.
For Alvin Kamara. And I think that with a quarterback, you can put the flak jacket on and some things like that. With a running back, it's much more difficult to manage that. And it's not a true fracture, but it's kind of destabilizes things. It's not like one of those things I think where if you take a hit the wrong way, like you puncture internal organs. But my point in bringing all this up is we're probably going to see Ingram as the starter. I mean, they didn't call up Latavius Murray, so maybe we will see Kamara. You're not playing Kamara in any event. But with Pollard, do we even trust Kellen Moore, who, by the way, apparently is he's going to be the patsy for the Cowboys, it appears. So, you would think actually a rational coaching game plan would be just a lot of short passing to Pollard, anything where you don't put the offensive line on the spot to hold their blocks for a long time to pass downfield. So I almost feel like this is, I'm going to shrug the shoulders because Tampa Bay is good against the run. I mean, I guess you play Ingram here and hope for a touchdown.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much how I was approaching this, because you would think that even if Kamara decides to give it a go, and I think that was the last phrase that I saw from Nick Underhill about an hour or so ago, is that they'll test him out in pregame. If he's comfortable enough with how things are looking, like they'll say they'll give it a go, but you can't start him at this point. But even still, like the rotation behind him, Mark Ingram coming in, like he had an injury like earlier this week, so coming into this game, like he was hurt. And then they have at least, who is it? Like Tony Jones still on the roster, like kicking behind him, even though the coaching staff hasn't been all that enamored with him. So it's just meh. It's just, and especially like you were just mentioning, against the Bucs defense, who, I mean, limited Ezekiel Elliott, kept Tony Pollard in check last week in the opener. It doesn't really give me a lot of confidence. And Jameis Winston also hurt like earlier in the week, like coming into this game. So I think, using the assumption of rational coaching, trying to look at this Bengals-Cowboys matchup, even though they don't have Dak and it's Cooper Rush, you could see why they would want to get just like 3 5-step drops, like just get the ball out, hit the back of your drop, first read, pow, just go. And with the Bengals pass rush being what it was, and that was essentially like the Bengals defense is what kind of kept it from being an absolute mess like last week against Pittsburgh, you could see a way for Pollard to rack up 4, 5, 6 catches like in that event. Because again, outside of their options, I mean, are we really getting, are people investing in like Noah Brown, like outside of those options? So I can understand like why leaning towards like Pollard would be the option, because I want it to be a thing. We all want it to be a thing. So that's where I lean more towards Pollard, just because he's one of those guys I can't let go of.
I'm changing my answer. I'm going to say Pollard too. Just play him on talent, hope for a big play. But look, this is how it is for fantasy football. We're going to spend like 2 or 3 minutes deciding between an option that's probably going to score 3 points and an option that's going to score 4 points. But maybe that point there was it's great. Yeah, it's great. I mean, but actually, it's funny that some of the more stimulating questions are the end of your bench desperation play kind of questions. That's where I know when I'm setting my lineups, Chris, that's what gets my juices flowing a little bit, because those are the ones that if you can get it right and it's a difference in your matchup, you feel like you coached your team to the victory. Right. Yeah. Let's coach some more teams to victories here. Brian Walden asks, PPR Edmonds or Henderson?
I go with Henderson today.
Yes.
I lean more towards Henderson. All of it's all qualitative, right? Because seeing Akers out on the field, seeing him struggling, seeing the lack of work that he got like in the opener, Sean McVay's comments like afterwards, and not to say that like Henderson completely stole the show. Henderson had the juice, but if you're looking at him at least being Henderson being the starter, Henderson being the guy that should at least get in rhythm first. And also against like the Falcons defense, I think it's easier and also he's a part of the passing game as well. So it's just all those facets at least point me towards like him being the better option versus Edmonds without Teron Armstead, I'm assuming.
And it's without, like a game time
decision. Right. And they're also out with is it also their
Austin Jackson, right tackle?
Austin Jackson, right tackle is out as well. So it's like they're also missing key pieces along their offensive line against the Ravens, like front 7 or front 5. So it's like I would rather look at who was I saying beforehand? Henderson. Henderson. like in that matchup. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think with Edmonds, you could get some cheap PPR points without a doubt. But the running game for Miami, and you'll give some credit to New England, but we'll give credit to Baltimore also that the running game is probably not going to get going. Let me put it this way: every Henderson question I've got this week, the answer's been Henderson. Because you're looking at a number one receiver, and it's not necessarily a great matchup. Atlanta's defense was a lot better than we expected last week against the Saints, at least until the fourth quarter, and Jameis did his thing. But you're talking about a lead back in what we hope is a better offense and a team that's just going to have a better overall performance in a game they should lead. I think that's a slam dunk. Cleveland Sanders. Got some good names here to talk about. PPR need a flex. Richie James. I'm so glad that in the year 2022
really
that Richie James is in a question. I've always been a believer in Richie James. KJ Osborne, George Pickens, or Kyle Phillips. Pickens is on his bench, so he would need to drop him for one of the wide receivers. So that adds a little bit of complication to the question.
I mean, we'll lead off with Osborne since we talked about him earlier, but I'm not going to talk you out of Richie James at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and the variable here is Tony, right? If this is the week that they decide all systems go for Tony, then that could reduce James. Also, Sterling Shepard could complicate things. I will say this. So having this added permutation that George Pickens is on my bench, so I would need to drop him from one of the wide receivers. Do I have FOMO? Fear of missing out, dropping Pickens? The problem is, I just don't think Mike Tomlin. I mean, the team's going to almost have to be out of playoff contention before he would go to Pickett, right? I mean, this team's going to have to go to like 4-7 or something, and then that's when I'm going to be interested in Pickens. So I'm not afraid of dropping Pickens, and you're right. I mean, I think Richie James maybe has the highest floor. Osborne has the highest ceiling. I wish if Kyle Phillips was healthy, if Kyle Phillips was just not on the injury report, he would probably be the answer here. But because we may not have many more chances to say it, let's say Richie James.
Yeah.
Michael Vidala, and these are important names in this one. Dortch or Lazard?
Ooh. So I'm going to go with Lazard here.
Okay.
Just given how things ended up for Green Bay last week, even outside of the Christian Watson dropped touchdown, it's just, let's say even if Rodgers still continues to look like Watson's way, who else like on that roster is really supposed to continue to vie for touches like in that passing game?
Right.
And while I do think it's an easier matchup, obviously like going up in Chicago, yada yada yada, it's just with that passing tree like being what it was, Allen Lazard immediately steps in like as their number one, like as the guy that Rodgers has the most chemistry with, can trust in the circle of trust, all the things that we want, like from a Packers like wide receiver. So while I think Dortch has the higher floor, just given the slot targets and the role that he has, like in the Cardinals offense, and it should be a good game environment, right? I do lean more towards Lazard because once they get into the red zone, who else is going to get, who's going to be one of the guys that getting the targets? And I don't see Dortch having that same role, like once the Cardinals get into the red zone versus when the Packers get into the red zone.
Yeah, it'll be real interesting to watch how Aaron Rodgers distributes the targets, because last week, we thought, okay, lean on the veteran, the chemistry with Randall Cobb.
Sure.
Maybe he's dusty. Same with Sammy Watkins. Watson dropped the 75-yard walk-in touchdown. At least he got open for a 75-yard walk-in touchdown. I think he was Patrick Peterson was trying to keep up with him on that one, and Dobbs was okay. But you wonder, like you said, if the scenario here is now that Lazard's back and Tunyon knocked off the rust. Coming back from his ACL tear. So Tunyon and Lazard become really interesting guys because, again, last year the Packers came down to New Orleans to open the season and lost 38-3. And then the next week they scored and then the next week they scored 35 points against the Lions. Right. So expect a bounce back game here. I'm going to say to go with Dortch, and I will add this. If it's a 0.5 PPR or a non-PPR, that pushes things over to Lazard because you need yards, you need touchdowns.
Yes.
If it's a PPR league, I do like Greg Dortch. I'm going to name check my man Still Ryan 5 every time I bring up Dortch because he was the biggest fan of Dortch that year in the draft. And Dortch is showing. I think Dortch is going to hang around. I think so if you're in a dynasty league and Dortch is out there, go ahead and pick him up because this could be one of those situations where a Wally Pipp kind of thing. Not that he's Lou Gehrig, but the idea is Dortch is going to show that he shouldn't come off the field, or at least he deserves a dedicated role. He had a great summer for the Cardinals. The other side of the equation here too is the Raiders were really generous to slot receivers last week, whether it was Keenan Allen or DeAndre Carter. So I I'm not. Let me put it this way: I'm nudging a lot of people towards playing Dortch, but I think you bring up a good scenario where Lazard just could have a monster game, and someone's going to have a monster game for the Packers, maybe more than one someone. So I'm glad we got to touch on those players.
Yeah.
B. Anton asked, hoping Higgins goes today. We all love to watch
Same. Yeah.
T. Higgins. Non PPR. Higgins, 2 out of the 3. 1 sits. Higgins, Bateman, or Renfro.
I'll go Higgins, Renfro, like
Yep.
out of that 2 for me.
Yeah, I agree, because I'm expecting Bateman to see a lot of Xavier Howard.
Yeah, and that's not good.
Yeah, and I mean, Bateman, if he didn't have the total blown coverage by the Jets last week, would have been a dud. And I think
I saw the moment I saw Dwayne McFarland's tweet. That's one of those times where when you watch the game and then you see the statistical analysis afterwards, it's like those 2 completely match, because I don't understand how the Ravens went through the entire offseason saying Bateman is going to be the wide receiver 1, Bateman is going to be our guy, Bateman, and then he's what, second, third in target utilization?
Yeah.
I don't get
well, it. And we're going to watch Devin Duvernay. So so fascinating to watch. I mean, there's such a, I don't want to say obsession, Chris, but I feel like more than any year I remember, the rate stats, usage stats, utilization stats are really dominating the conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where the puck was, not where the puck's going to be. And, sometimes the puck is going to stay there. In Wayne Gretzky terms, you skate to where the puck's going to be, not to where it is. So Devin Duvernay, his usage, et cetera, was low, but Devin Duvernay also made one of the most impressive trust catches that in the next gen stats era, the 0.1 yards of separation. So that can affect the usage the next week. And I'm not saying to play Devin Duvernay today. I'm just saying be open to Devin Duvernay being more. We knew there was going to be somebody, right? James Boucher got hurt. Yeah. Isaiah Likely was a dud. Maybe it's Duvernay. We knew there was going to be somebody else in this pass offense, and it could definitely change things. I think it is Higgins, Renfro, and Renfro because the Raiders against the Cardinals. Did you see how much tougher it was for the Chiefs? And let's put some respect on the Chargers defense.
Sure.
The Chargers look like a Super Bowl team. They're just the Chargers.
Yes.
But they look like a Super Bowl team.
Yeah.
And the Chargers defense, you saw how much tougher it was for the Chiefs. And so week 1 against the Cardinals, we thought, wow, the Chiefs, just masterpiece offense, KC masterpiece, right? No, not exactly.
Right.
Maybe it's just the Cardinals defense. Get your Raiders in today. Especially Josh Jacobs. All right, the Johnsons. Don't trust Dobbins. Need a second flex. Damian Pierce, Ashton Doolin. This will give us a chance to talk about the Colts.
Sure.
Chris Olave also just picked up Jordan Mason. And then I like this because this is like neurotic like me. And I mean that with love, the Johnsons. Like he says, just go with Pierce and hope for the best. Like this is what I'm thinking. So we're looking at Pierce, Olave. I don't think it's Mason, although I think picking up Mason when you have a roster spot or Tyrion Davis Price just to see what happens.
That's sharp.
It is the San Francisco running game, which could really show us a different dimension today in much better conditions. So we're choosing between Pierce, Doolin, and Olave in a PPR.
I think it's Pierce, and just from the path to touches is so much easier for Damian Pierce. I mean, Ashton Doolin, even without Michael Pittman, even without Alec Pierce like on the roster, like Doolin, while he has had some bright spots throughout most of camp, which is awesome to hear because he was a UDFA if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
So it's like it's really cool seeing him become a larger part of this offense, but still you can't expect a ton from him in this matchup. They could just as easily lean on Jonathan Taylor, Naheem Hines, maybe a few shots to Paris Campbell, and then they just pack it up and it's like, all right, guys, we've wrapped this one up. We needed to come out with a win this week anyway. Let's just go home. And then Chris Olave is still working behind Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry. It's like he's third in the pecking order, like so far. So it's like, who's the guy that's going to be the one that's going to be out there collecting most of the touches, like right out of the gate? If you're looking for at least that floor, I think Pierce provides that easily.
Yeah, I think you really phrased it perfectly. The Johnsons just go with Pierce and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And with Doolin, like you said, and again, this is more of a speculative pickup and see what happens kind of angle because and I think Jeff Tiefertiller, our great Jeff Tiefertiller, always. Man, I don't think I've ever won a dynasty trade with Jeff Tiefertiller.
Oh, anyway, you do not want to get in the ring with him.
No. Anyway, you pointed out he's 25, but he's a small school player, so you have a different growth curve with the small school players. So he had a tremendous summer. And Doolin has made some plays. Look, he's got a size speed combination that's pretty impressive and can hang among NFL starting wide receivers. Olave it's just a question of whether that pass rush is going to get home and Jameis Winston's going to have time, because the Saints gave up 4 sacks in the first 35 minutes. We thought the offensive line would be a strength, and we thought the Falcons pass rush was a dud. And in fact, it turned out a little different for a good part of that game.
Yeah.
But if Carlton Davis is blotting out Michael Thomas, you also have Jarvis Landry. Don't sleep on Jarvis Landry in this game. I won't be surprised if it's an Olave breakout game, but we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and project these things. It's more like the classic, put him on your bench, and if he goes off on your bench, then you're happy. Now, real quickly, to touch on a few other things with the Colts in this one, there's also Paris Campbell, and I would say, we wouldn't change my answer to the question if it was Paris Campbell, but I think out of Paris Campbell and Ashton Doolin, Campbell has a higher ceiling of the two for the Colts desperation plays. But really, if you have to play a desperation tight end, there's Kylan Grants, and he'll probably play a larger role here. Maybe a few more targets trickle down to Mo Alley Cox. Mike Strawn is an interesting name to remember here. Another small school guy, another size speed guy. Again, this is more like your deep dynasty scouting, but I actually think it's Nyheim Hines, and I'm just got Nyheim Hines on the brain. I think if there's a player to say, like, who are they going to ask to shoulder what this offense needs without Michael Pittman? And they gave Taylor 35 touches last week.
Right.
I know they don't want to put too much on him this week.
Well, if you've got like Nyheim Hines like on the brain, what was it? Both Frank Wright and Chris Ballard had Hines like on the brain throughout all of offseason, like throughout some of their press conferences, talking him up. So it's like, I think it's quick and dirty analysis, just saying that, well, if one pass catcher goes down, then the pass catching running back becomes like the focal point of the offense. But in this case, the coaches were already telling us, man, like they already gave us the blueprint, like in the offseason. So I'm with it.
And he had a couple of touches in the red zone, including a terrible call on 4th and goal when they had him in the Wildcat and whatever. But the point is, they called his number on 4th and goal. Absolutely. Okay, shake and bake, 145. Hey, fellas, who do I start out of? Curtis Samuel, Allen Robinson, Rashad Bateman, Elijah Moore.
First two? I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree.
Curtis Samuel, I was so happy to see Curtis Samuel, one, healthy, and two, a very large part of the offense last week. I mean, the Commanders, they really came out and they shocked me. Like almost from
that's
top
Ron
to
Rivera. I think that's Ron Rivera, man.
From top to bottom, just Ron Rivera in week one, having the confidence in Carson Wentz to let him go out and throw that much. I was shocked. But on the opposite side, or on the other side of his passes, Curtis Samuel like really being there, like in just not just like no pitch count, none of the other stuff that we heard about guys like with injury concerns like from the offseason coming in. No, it's just he's in there, he's full go, and he was leading the team. I mean, he really was out there like being the Curtis Samuel that we've expected him to be over the past like couple of seasons. So definitely Curtis Samuel for me, especially they'll be in Detroit, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, exactly. So if there's if you can't pick on the Cardinals today, try to pick on the Lions.
Yes. So like against Detroit in a dome, no weather concerns there. And then just Allen Robinson, because they have to get that ship right. I know we already talked about Darrell Henderson, but it's just, if you ever wanted just a get right game, not just for a couple of players, but just for an entire team. It has to be like all the key pieces that we saw put up duds from the Rams like this week.
Yeah, in the relationship between Sean McVay and the team needs to like give him flowers or something. Right. And I think it's right that Samuel and Allen Robinson. And when I was getting some Curtis Samuel questions earlier this week, Chris, I was surprised at some of the names I was recommending Samuel over. I almost feel like Samuel, we have to, instead of assuming that week one was a fluke, we should assume that's going to be the baseline usage for him. Yeah. He looked so good in the open field. My, oh my, did he look good in the open field. And what folks might not realize, he's not quite Deebo Samuel. We had, I think, 3 or 4 rush attempts last week. Scott Turner, back when he was with Carolina, got to take over play calling just for the last few games. And he used Samuel as a runner more than his dad ever did. And then, lo and behold, the team that Turner goes to signed Samuel, right? Right, yeah. And we haven't seen Samuel healthy. But now that we are seeing him fully healthy, not only are we seeing the usage correspond to a player they paid. I don't remember what the contract was, but they paid him. And you're seeing him show, I deserve that usage. And I'm going to keep this offense on schedule. So I think it's Samuel and then Allen Robinson, you said. And Bateman, we talked about Xavier Howard. And with Elijah Moore, again, I always like to tell the story when your football guys retreat in Vegas. Brian Hoyer was starting a playoff game for the Texans. I think it was against the Bengals. Was it against the Bengals?
That sounds right.
I don't remember. I don't remember exactly who it was. But my point is, I was like, all right, JJ Watt, et cetera, et cetera. I think maybe Aaron Foster was still playing. I was like, you know what? Even though it's Brian Hoyer, I'm going to put some cash on the Texans. And the
Mhm.
game kicked off, and I realized, oh my, what did I do? I just trusted Brian Hoyer with some of my hard-earned money. That's kind of like starting Elijah Moore. I know Elijah Moore had that big game with Joe Flacco last year, but then like you watch the game last week, you're like, oh,
Like
I
we're in
was
trouble.
counting on Joe Flacco. Like I actually rationally set my lineup and said, Joe Flacco will make things better.
Yeah.
And he might, but we'll see. Zach Wilson, get back out there. We'll see what happens. Real quick, because we talked about ETN already, but this gives us a chance to talk about Jalen Waddle. Tyler Audie asks, ETN, Jalen Waddle, or Kareem Hunt as a PPR flex?
I actually do like in PPR. I do like Waddle there.
Mm-hmm.
The Ravens, they lost Kyle Fuller, so they're
Yep.
they're
And
nickel,
Marlon
nickel
Humphrey's going
corner.
to play, but not healthy. I don't think Marcus Peters is going to play. So that vaunted secondary is not back together yet.
Exactly. So it's like, while the easiest way to look at this is it's going to be just the Tyreek Hill eruption game, like quote unquote. If like Tua, if having your fantasy implications like wrapped around like Tua's arm is anything great to celebrate, but still Tyreek Hill could be that guy to pop off for like 6 150 and 2. But on the same time, like the solid floor targets, like while I still saw at least a decent number of targets like for Waddle last week, the role that he plays on the interior, it could really create like a decent matchup for him to rack up against 7, 8, 9 catches like in the game. So yeah, I like Waddle there.
I'm not going to talk folks out of Waddle. I'm not a Tua Tagovailoa believer yet.
Neither am I.
I mean, I'll give it up for Mike McDaniel for calling that post on 4th and 7. It was the play of the game, and Waddle it made Waddle's week. And notice we're not even touching on Kareem Hunt, even though he had those 2 touchdowns. And it is Cleveland facing the Jets today.
Yeah.
So
Conklin's out, if I'm remembering correctly.
Conklin's out. So, and I think they've had some other injury problems at right tackle. But the Jets defense. So that's another thing, by the way. Let's back up a little bit. For the first half, the Jets defense was giving Baltimore all they could handle.
Mm-hmm.
Jets defense might be at the very least neutral, if not negative, depending on how the health goes. So, Hunt, I didn't even pause. I'm thinking ETN here only because, again, I'm thinking about how close he was to the big plays, and I think they're going to continue to stress him. But I'm not going to talk anybody out of Waddle either. It'll be interesting to see how this Baltimore-Miami game goes. I guess in the end, I'm going with ETN here because I look at Jacksonville, Indianapolis as having a lot more offensive possibilities than Baltimore, Miami. But look, it's week 2. We basically like have an answer that stands out and like backfill some sort of reasoning. There's not really a totally clear answer here. And like we said, we're interested to see how this stuff goes with these offenses. I think the item this morning was ETN and James Robinson will split carries. And depending on how you look at the utilization last week, they didn't quite split carries last week. It was more James Robinson. That could actually be seen as a positive for ETN. We'll see. I have a feeling they're going to try to get him going. We'll see if he actually does his part. Sincere Taylor. Sunday morning, I like the word conundrum. I like that as opposed to a dilemma. I think a dilemma is when you have to choose between 2 equally bad options, right? The rock and a hard place. But Michael Thomas and Terry McLaurin, that's the first half, and then we'll do the second half.
For me, I think I prefer Michael Thomas like in this matchup. I think that's where I'm leaning. McLaurin, we were just singing the praises of Curtis Samuel, it looked like McLaurin was taking more of like the downfield shots, like where again, if it's Carson Wentz, I don't know if that's really where you want to be, like putting most of your eggs in that particular basket. So I lean more on Michael Thomas. It's good to see him healthy. It's good to see him back. And then in a tougher matchup, if there is a secondary that, at least if you want to try and test their secondary versus trying to get your run game going, it probably would be the Bucks. So yeah, I think I like Michael Thomas in that one.
Yeah, Thomas. And look, if Thomas can do something that he had trouble with in the game he got hurt, which is get the drop on Carlton Davis, then we really know that Thomas is back. With Terry McLaurin, it's almost like DeAndre Hopkins early last year, in the first half of the year, where the additions on the offensive side of the ball in the passing game made it so they don't have to rely on McLaurin as much, which seems bad for fantasy at first glance. But and especially against Detroit, if defenses adjust, then it only takes that 1 or 2 shots downfield like it did last week for McLaurin, ended up being a solid play. I probably lean McLaurin here, mostly because of the Detroit matchup. That being said, again, fact-finding. We're in fact-finding mode, and I'm glad we get to talk about this guy. Jeff Wilson, I'm assuming that the Robinson here is Allen. I'm sorry. Well, it could be Allen Robinson, but I'm assuming it's James Robinson since they're both running backs. This could be Allen Robinson or Garrett Wilson for all I know. But let's assume it's Jeff Wilson and James Robinson in a standard league.
So I lean more towards like Jeff Wilson, like in this matchup, because you do have at least, I don't want to say concerns about, I don't want to take anything from about Trey Lance like from last week's game. And sure, week one jitters, stutter steps here and there and all that, but just with the context of the game itself, horrific conditions, so on and so forth, not a ton to take away. Against the Bears, I don't even care just how bad the conditions were.
Yeah.
But it did look like almost immediately after Elijah Moore went down, it was like, I mean, Wilson was the one that they wanted to immediately turn to. Given the way that Seattle's like run defense like looked like last week,
Right.
it is that is a defense that I would want to test. And if Jeff Wilson is the one going to be getting those carries, and since we were just talking about the potential split between James Robinson and Travis Etienne, I'm not concerned, at least at this point, with TDP or Jordan Mason. I mean, speculative ads for sure. But if Wilson is going to be the one that they want to lean on the most, Wilson's going to be one starting the game and getting the bulk of the carries, at least the way that most of us are projecting it right now. I lean more towards Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm interested to see how much Deebo Samuel does. And if Jeff Wilson doesn't quite have the juice, we could see Mason or Davis Price get a shot at that. I'm inclined to go Wilson here, mainly because of what you said with the matchups against Seattle. But then again, Indianapolis, even though they stymied the Houston run game last week, DeForest Buckner might not be healthy.
Shaq Leonard's still out.
Still out.
Yeah.
So, man, I hate seeing that with Leonard.
Yeah.
All right. We've got a couple minutes left, so let's try to do like lightning round. All right. A lot of these, I think we should be able to just get the answer and move on. And I want to reward the people who got through the earliest. So let's see if we can knock out some questions here. Dane M. Burkhead, Hines, or Pollard?
Oh, Hines.
Hines. Yeah, exactly. Mel Johnson, Ramondre Stevenson, or Pollard?
Stevenson.
Yeah, I think that's Stevenson. I mean, I'm just excited, at least at the possibility that he'll have the passing game role. Dan Matachero, T. Higgins, or Allen Robinson?
T.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the Steelers just harassed Burrow so badly. Dallas has some pass rushers, but I think you got to give T the edge here. Okay. Again, we're going to say this a lot. Hines or Devontae Smith?
Hines.
Yeah, I think it's Hines. Hines or Jeff Wilson? 0.5 PPR.
And 0.5 PPR. See, that's the kicker for me. Wilson, but I understand if you want to go Hines.
Yeah. I love me some Nyheim Hines. And I won't be surprised if Jeff Wilson is one of the more disappointing players today, but I think you play it by the book. So here's a real quick note on that as I'm slowing down my own lightning round. It's almost like a psychological analysis of Kyle Shanahan, right? Does Kyle Shanahan really want to go back to Jimmy Garoppolo? Because if he does, maybe you put a lot on Trey Lance's plate, and don't want to say set him up to fail. But now, if you actually are committed to Trey Lance, like you said, you have a very conservative game plan. You use a lot of running. You use a lot of the plays that scheme players open by design, and you just step up things for Trey Lance, which that's the rational coaching. But I think that when it comes to how Kyle Shanahan's handling this quarterback situation, we can't assume rational coaching anymore. So just something to watch when we get to that game this afternoon. We got to do this for all the people out there tight end. It's so funny, Chris. Every year, hope springs eternal at tight end. And then after a week or a few weeks, we're like, well, most people are just actually, screwed at tight end, basically. Sorry, Joe. Rob Bonicelli. Start Taysom Hill over Cole Kmet if Kamara is out. Taysom Hill as a desperation tight end option.
I don't see why not.
Yeah,
why not?
Play him as the running back. Why not Taysom Hill as the running back? You're paying him. Cole Kmet, he's one of those. I'm not even saying don't start him until we see something. I'm not. Don't even roster him until we see something. Casey Smith has one that has a couple players I wanted to touch on here. Drake London or Darnell Mooney?
I like Drake London this week. I really do. I mean, listen to Matt Harmon. Like, if Matt Harmon's on a guy, you should probably roster that guy.
And I think that Drake London is going to be the one who benefits from all the misery that Kyle Pitt's fantasy teams are going to experience this year.
Yeah.
Because I think you're just going to see, again, in this game, where's Jalen Ramsey? And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe if Jalen Ramsey's on Kyle Pitts. So just as a quick aside, if you have Kyle Pitts, especially since Travis Kelce already played, if you have Kyle Pitts, you're playing him today.
Okay?
You're playing. Folks, just don't pause and think about it. Don't talk remember what happened with Mike Williams on Thursday night, okay? Just because somebody let up. And maybe that's a Darnell Mooney quote there. We're talking about Darnell Mooney after he was disappointing in the slop in the monsoon and maybe against against Green Bay tonight. Maybe it gets better for Darnell Mooney, but I think he's in that keep him on your bench and be excited when he goes off category for now, even though I loved Mooney going into the season and Fields did have some success throwing downfield. But I think what we're going to see is that London, I think there was last week he had a big catch when like Caden Ellis was on him.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like that's the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that's going to happen for Drake London this year because it's about Kyle Pitts in that offense. All right. It's so funny too. Like some of these questions are just, but at the same time, those are the people we want to help the most. Mark asks Bill, half PPR Julio or Pollard? It's kind of a Julio temperature check.
I was gonna say if he's healthy, I mean, give it the next we got like 45-ish minutes or a half hour or something like that before inactives come out. So yeah, I lean Julio there.
I lean Julio too. This one circles us all the way back to what we were talking about with Minnesota. Krantis. Choose two: Thielen, Damian Harris, Chris Olave, Paris Campbell. PPR.
Give me Thielen and Paris.
Yeah, I think it's Thielen and a receiver. I don't think it's Damian Harris. Paris, Olave. Actually, they're kind of the Ohio State products. I'll say it, but Thielen's the easy one here again because this could be a lot better week for Minnesota's offense because they're playing a better offense. Chris DeSantis said Damian Pierce, Najee Harris, and James Conner pick two. I mean, we're not putting Pierce in over Harris or Conner yet. Not after what happened last week.
No, I can't do it. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to have injury concerns or with the foot thing, but it looked like the team is already posturing like he's good to go. So yeah, I'm with Harris.
Yeah, I think we basically covered. I'm going to do Will's question because he's a Bengals honk like you. Who's he flex? ETN, Singletary, Curtis Samuel, Darnell Mooney, or Allen Robinson?
Out of that group, I'm Samuel.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? Yeah. I mean, I think that we are definitely looking at Curtis Samuel as kind of a start until further notice guy, and maybe it backfires. But this week, because of that Detroit matchup, I think that makes it easier to say, I'm just going to trust that what we saw in week 1 from Samuel is what we're going to see from him going forward. Going forward, you're going to see us every Sunday morning, 10 a.m. It's really fun to spend this time with y'all and do what we can. Love the turnout. As always, like, comment, subscribe if you like what you are seeing here. It helps us out, supports football guys. We come and we like to provide the service for you on Sunday mornings. I'll continue to be monitoring my Twitter, and we had such a great turnout, and there's so many questions. I hope that how we answered some of the earlier questions helps you, even though we didn't get to your question. And I especially appreciate that, even though we're not going to be able to get to everyone's question, or even close to everyone's question, because y'all have such a great turnout for us, that I'll still be monitoring Twitter, try to answer some questions over there as we come up to game time. By the way, real quick, Chris, any weather concerns today?
We mentioned the SF game earlier. I don't have any concerns about that particular game. It looked like there's going to be some rain like earlier in the afternoon, since that game kicks off. That's the mid game, right? 4:25 kickoff, if I'm remembering correctly. Rain in the earlier parts of the day out in Santa Clara, but if per league regulations, the grounds crew can cover the field like with a tarp, just like we saw out in Chicago for Soldier Field. So even if the conditions do get bad, they should cover it up until like 2 hours before kickoff. That's per league regulations. So I'm not concerned about that particular game. Winds were up to 15 miles an hour. But the winds are actually coming like from the southeast, which runs like in the same direction as Levi Stadium. I almost said Candlestick, and I know that's not right. But yeah, I have no concerns about that game. Scattered thunderstorms down in the Jacksonville area. Doesn't look like there's going to be a ton of accumulation during the game, but since they are thunderstorms, you might see something like a lightning delay. That's probably the worst case scenario. But other than that, I think everything should be good for today. Looks like there might be rain in the Orchard Park area for the Buffalo game tomorrow. So folks, take a look at that for Monday night.
Oh no, for Buffalo fans, Derrick Henry. It's again a wonderful week to everybody. It's great to get to serve y'all. Thank you always for everything you do to support football guys, everything you do to support the fantasy football community, being part of it, putting all those good vibes out there. We want to do the best for you because you're the class.